as interesting as the next previous session. We have all our speakers today, so that's really, really nice. Ramona, Bev,
Baijnath,
Boledi, Ditshego, and Isaac. I'm going to give you, you all have 20 minutes each. I will give you a 5-minute warning, and that's it. All right, thank you.
hello everybody, I'm Ramona Baijnath. Thank you so much for coming. So up front I'm going to ask you all for forgiveness. I have a very restless pen which decided that I had 2 life stories to tell instead of 1. So the first one is the life history of Dimakatso, which is an academic account. The second is the life history of Swasti, which evolved in conversation. The naming of these participants were all by a process of self-selection. So I'm going to start with Dimakatso. Dimakatso, violence, the only language I understand. The narrative is drawn from 3 in-depth, one-on-one, semi-structured interviews with Dimakatso totaling 11 hours. Dimakatso is a 30-year-old mother of 1 who joined the Zibuseni Reloaded segment of the Expanded Public Works Program in Gauteng in 2013. She is gaining assistance in administration. Dimakatso comes from the Free State Province and is Sotho. She earns a stipend of between 1,900 to 2,200 rand a month. Dimakatso waited in line to join my study for about 90 minutes for a chance to tell her story. She was clearly emotional, but her story pours out of her. She does not stop until her story is spent. She now resides in Khoisan with her husband, who is not the father of her child. Her 15-year-old son lives in the Free State with her mother and receives a monthly remittance of between 500 to 700 rand. Dimakatso's highest level of education is grade 11. Whilst working at the EPWP, she enrolled for a part-time distance learning course in administration and is currently in the process of obtaining this 2-year certificate. Her husband is the main breadwinner in their household of 2 and contributes at least 4,000 rand a month towards food and rent. Dimakatso receives a child support grant of 350 rand. Her intersexual identities include motherhood, HIV positive status, gender, her marital status, and a vocation as an administrative assistant. She views her racial identity as an African black as more important than an ethnicity as Sotho, and she is unconcerned with politics. During our second interview, Dimakatso identified several critical scenes in her life, which have shaped her life history narrative. These scenes include her teenage pregnancy, physical abuse, rape, entrance into Zibuseni Reloaded, being HIV positive, possible infertility, and marital instability. She grew up as the only girl in a household of 4 boys. Her father had passed on earlier on, and her mother, who was a cleaner at the local clinic, was the breadwinner. Dimakatso fell pregnant whilst in high school during grade 10, and her child was born in 2002. After the birth of her child, she completed grade 11. At the onset of her pregnancy, her elder brother, who was clearly upset about the pregnancy, became physically violent. It happened suddenly at the beginning of my pregnancy. He hit me badly on 3 different times. One incident involved him hitting me on the back of the head with a ceramic tile. I spoke to the father of my child, and we decided to come to the site, meaning Gauteng. My mother tried to help, but she's only a woman. Dimakatso fled the Free State without completing matric. For a time, they lived peacefully in Midrand, and she gained a small income through piecework as a hairdresser. Around 2006, the relationship between Dimakatso and her boyfriend rapidly escalated to violence. He, my boyfriend, was the same as my brother. He was physically violent. He used to tell me that violence was the only language I understood, and that I had no one to cry on. Her boyfriend would get paid fortnightly, and was usually violent around this time. If we were walking down the street, he expected me to walk with my head down. If I lifted my head, he would tell me I was flirting with other men. The violence culminated in 2007. They had a vicious argument when her boyfriend told her that he was grateful for her help, but his girlfriend was coming to stay with him. This is the man she was living with for years. That girlfriend completed matric, and he told me to start preparing to go. Until that girl came, I should stay here and help him with washing his clothes and cooking. I started to be emotional. I was angry. An emotional Dimakatso waited for her boyfriend to fall asleep, and then took her child and ran away. She slept on the street with the child for 2 days. On the second night, when I was on the street, there was these guys who came and raped me. I was raped by 2 strangers. In the morning, I saw the police car. I think they were on duty. I stopped the car. The police took me to the hospital. Then they cleaned me up and gave me some tablets, but they did not tell me to come back. The police called this other lady, a social worker, who took me to a safe home. We stayed there less than 3 months, because then I contracted my mom in the Free State, and I told her everything, but not the rape. I did not tell anybody about the rape. She returned home to the Free State. The period between 2007 and 2008 was a dark time for Dimakatso. The only thing I wanted that time was to die. That was the only solution for my life. But because of my child, I had to think otherwise. I was just at home doing nothing. I was thinking about suicide. In late 2008, she met the man she would marry. He offered her uncles 25,000 rand in Lobola to be allowed to marry Dimakatso. Shortly after the marriage, the newlyweds moved to Kagiso in Gauteng province. Dimakatso then approached her local councillor for work opportunities and gained access to a 6-month gardening project at the new Kagiso Mall, which was still under construction at the time. Once the mall was complete in 2011, she worked at a fish and chips takeaway for a year. But due to the late hours and the unavailability of transport, she was forced to quit. For over a year, Dimakatso hacked a living doing piecework as a hairdresser. A life-changing moment came for her when her counsellor called her about the Zibuseni Reloaded EPWP project. She started work in November 2013. The couple's financial circumstances improved with the addition of Dimakatso's stipend. They wanted to start a family, but Dimakatso did not fall pregnant. So she went for a series of tests to determine what was the issue. During this time, she tested positive for HIV. She was devastated and told her husband, who also went for an HIV test, but was not HIV positive. Although Dimakatso's husband was very supportive and loving about her newly diagnosed HIV status, he still wanted a child. I'm going to stay at home and focus on my... Dimakatso registered earlier in 2016 for a 2-year certificate course in administration. Post the EPWP contract, she hoped to complete this qualification. I'm going to stay at home and focus on my study first. I'm going to do a driver's license and I'm going to go back to school for 1 year to do my matric. So after that, I don't know what will happen. At the time of the second interview, Dimakatso was deeply concerned about the stability of our marriage. I hope one day things will happen or God will help me, that I will have more kids. I want to have at least 2 more. I spoke to him, meaning her husband. He's going to the doctor to check if he can do any children. So then I can be free from this, what I have stress of. In our culture, if you are a Makoti and you don't have children, then to them you are useless. To your in-laws, you are useless. At the time of the 3rd interview, Dimakatso knew her marriage was in trouble. I used to be happy, but now I don't know. My husband is not the same anymore. He has changed. I think that there's someone else. I wanted him to also get checked. I said to him that if it was my fault, I would give him permission to have a baby outside. It would be hard for me, but if it was my fault, what can I do? Suddenly he came to me and he said he found someone, but he didn't even go to the doctor to check. So after that, he's been changed. I don't know whether that person, he's been sending her money. And when I ask him for what, he says for checkups. Checkups? What checkups? Is she pregnant? He has changed. He's not the same. I don't know what to do. It is hard. Dimakatso applied for various permanent positions within DRD whilst at EPWP. Post-interviews, I learned that Dimakatso was permanently appointed as an artisan. One of our life goals had materialized. And moving on to the second life history narrative. It's called Becoming Swasti. Swasti grew up in the working class historical Indian neighborhood of Merebank, which is in the southern part of Durban, KwaZulu-Natal. This was the territory where the pungent odors of engine, mondi, and saprep overpowered the fragrances of curry on the cook. Across the road from Merebank was Wedgworth, where the colored community was installed at the doorstep of engine. When she was in grade 1, Swasti's hand shot up when the teacher asked them about their career choices. Swasti wanted to be a pilot. After all, the old Durban airport was just a stone's throw away from her home, and she had watched millions of planes take off and land just a few meters higher than her home. Before Swasti could finish her sentence, Deepak had already interrupted loudly. Girls can't be pilots. You can be an air hostess. Swasti was deflated, but didn't yet have the vocabulary to form a retort. At 16, Swasti let Deepak feel her up. When she decided she didn't want a relationship with him, Deepak blackmailed her by threatening to tell her parents and the school that she had touched his dick. Dick touching, after all, amounted to common law marriage. Swasti belonged to Deepak. She left, and he did tell all. When Swasti was in grade 12, she had no hopes of passing maths and decided that journalism was really what she wanted to do. After completing a diploma at Natal Technikon in 21, she joined the newsroom at independent newspapers and ventured into political science at UKZN. She was an interloper between the newsroom and academia. She was popular. She soon found herself in a relationship with a man a few years younger than her father, who was a formidable social influencer. He wore a thick gold chain around his neck and sovereigns on his hands. He was attracted to her because of the people who were attracted to her. One starless night, he said, my mouth was too big. He took away my cell phone, clothing, and keys and forced me to spend the night in captivity. After the beating, he picked me off the floor and gingerly put me into bed. He put his arms around me and said he loved me. He had to hit me to make me toe the line because I had too many friends, too much independence, and not enough dependence on him, and my opinions were too loud. When I reported the incident, culture tried to silence my voice. It tried to appeal to my supposedly conservative background, not to seek a justice that rightfully belonged to me. Police officers and other men and women belonging to my culture thought I was seeking revenge, a scorned woman with jealous inclinations. Through the lenses, I was no victim. I could lay no claim to innocence. Lying on the floor, naked, with a cocked gun in her mouth and her hands bound, she wished she'd pulled the trigger. The pain was, she who was a journalist couldn't find the words to give life to her pain. When Swasti was 24, she met a man she loved, and he loved her right back. The problem was his mother hated her more than their collective love for each other. Swasti fell pregnant. The situation with her would-be mother-in-law stripped her of her dignity every day. She couldn't breathe, and she made the choice not to let her child take his first breath. The man she loved her enough to support her. She lay on a sterile table with her legs spread apart and chose an end. I didn't know I would bleed after the abortion. There was nobody to tell me. The blood dripped down my legs and I didn't care. At the age of 29, Swasti now had 2 little girls who didn't look like her. The security guard at the water park came to her and asked her if she knew the children she was staring at. Swasti was enraged. The cashiers at Edgar's touched her girl's hair and asked Swasti if they had the same father. Swasti was enraged. At 39, Swasti's rage is simmering. Her words had come out of the mouths of politicians and even presidents. But when would her words come out of her mouth? So, to conclude, the life history narratives visibilized in this paper allow you to gain an insight into the life histories of Dimakatso and Swasti. The scenes explored were selected by both Dimakatso and Swasti, who determined their own most significant milestones or turning points. Through these narratives, we are able to understand how Dimakatso and Swasti select and project their unique identities, why they chose to pursue certain goals, and their strategies for goal realization. Individual hopes, fears, dreams, previously unspoken, rise to the light. The golden thread in Dimakatso's life history is the well-developed set of strategies and the resilience she brings to the table in the hope of creating a better life. So what of Swasti? Well, she finally got her voice. She is me. Both Dimakatso and I come to the study, clothed in our own life histories. Our choices as African women are molded by both our past experiences and our future aspirations. The telling of life histories is the process of discovering how we become her. It is my hope that, that our voices and our histories will be impossible to unhear. It is my hope that these voices do not become the single story of African women, but form part of an unending stream of her stories that may not be unheard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ramona. We'll take questions at the end of the session. Next, we're going to listen to Beverley.
Good morning, everybody. I'm talking about the formation of Khoisan works of imagination in South Africa. My name is Beverley. I'm interested in the Khoisan artworks in terms of my mother's, my matrilineal background. My mother is from a Khoisan background, and I'm interested in looking at Khoisan art in a different way as a work of imagination. So when I think of the Khoisan, I'm not thinking of them in separate ways, as in San or Khoi. I'm putting them together because I'm following Yvette Abrams, who works in the thinking that the Khoisan would have unified themselves against the resistance of colonialism. So I work with them together in that way, okay? And I think of them as the people who were living before colonialism. And in that sense, I think of settler colonialism. And in that way, I think of them as coming to the country in order to gain sovereignty over everything in their domain. So that's kind of the framework within which I am working. Oh, God, I'm so nervous about this. It's very nerve-wracking because it's been a very hard process for me. So I find this is a very safe space because the Khoisan art is worked with mostly in anthropology. Okay, we know that. And within that, the person who is the most prominent is J.D. Lewis, and you know, he started the Rock Art Institute next to us, the Origin Center, etc., etc. So I've been finding it very difficult to work with his text and to actually engage with it. And so at the beginning, I thought I'd look at Sophie Peters, which is the artist that I mentioned. She was born in the 1960s. She moved from Johannesburg up to Cape Town with a community arts project. And that was where I worked. And then as I went into it, Sophie kind of ended up in the background and I ended up only working on the text. So that's what I'm presenting today, is only my thinking around what, before I got to Sophie. Okay, so that's kind of this. This is one of the quotes. So J.D. Lewis thinks that Khoisan art is art in inverted commas. So it's not art in a Western sense, right? He thinks of it also as image making. And that fascinated me because I started to ask myself, so what is imagination, what is image making, and what's the history of imagination in a Western sense, so that I could be able to find out how did the Khoisan think of imagination. And that was quite fascinating for me, so I thought, let me talk about that. Because you can't understand Sophie's work unless one talks about this. So this is one of the quotes which J.D. Lewis presents, and it enables me to talk through a lot of the issues, right? So the first thing is he's quite impressed with the Khoisan artwork. And in terms of his thinking, he's thinking of it in terms of rock art, right? That's the term. And he's thinking of it in sand. When he talks about the line, what is special about the Khoisan, according to him now, right, is that they have threads of light, right? So through a social, cultural ritual, which only happened pre-colonial, for him it was a religious experience, a spiritual experience. And what he said is that that can only be experienced within that space. What was fascinating for me is that when I started working on the Khoisan artwork, I could actually see those lights. You know, and they're literally white lights, you know, like a shooting star. Just imagine a shooting star happening in this room. So it's that light. For me, there are two golden dots on it. So whenever I'm working and I'm struggling and I kind of feel like I'm getting over something, something happens. And when I was thinking of how am I going to present this, I literally saw, like, you know, magic colored different balls coming on. But I'm not the only one. There are at least 3 of us that I've discovered. My cousin Shelly, some of you know her, Shelly Barry, she's also been experiencing it. So the plausibility of these things are more about how many of us are experiencing, how we're experiencing it, and how do we think about it. And then there's a third person who also started going into Khoisan healing, and she started to also see these lights. Then I started to think, so what is real and what is simple imagination? Because he speaks about simple imagination. And okay, so what is that? That could be the fundamentals of imagination. So I thought, okay, let me check out what is the fundamentals of imagination. And these are the 2 quotes that fascinated me. Ntabiseng Motseme, in her article, the Mute Always Speaks, she describes the imagination as the free play of possibilities in a state of non-involvement with respect to the world of perception. Okay? And that's fascinating because it's almost like you're playing with all kinds of possibilities. And if you think of the history of imagination, it comes from the mental image. And then the second meaning, it comes from representation, which is an image. So imagination, imaginary, imago, image. So one can almost see how J.D. Lewis gets from imagination to image making. So he's saying that the experiences were real. So I went around and I asked the children, you know, the imaginary friends, is it real? It is real. So there's a reality in imagination and there's an imagination in reality. And it's real because while I was working with this, I thought to myself, Toni Morrison. Right. So what has happened is that she talks about imagination as pictures with feelings. And I thought, now that's interesting. Let me move, instead of moving with a knowledge of J.D. Lewis, let me move with a feeling of J.D., of what he's writing. Okay, so that's kind of that. So I kind of thought, well, it's not just shamans who are able to do this. It's also other people. And as you engage, it seems to be, because we don't know, we're new, right? So we're learning about this culture. It seems to be that more of us can experience this, right? And so I started to think, well, we are shamans in a way because we are healing, right? So that's kind of now, so that's, then I thought, okay, so if you have imagination and you have an image, now the image in terms of the etymology is about representing, started out as representing your identity. And we can understand that, you know, our style, our image, you know, the way you present yourself. So that is the image. So then it meant that what J.D. Lewis was saying is that they were representing what they were experiencing that was real. Okay? So the making of the art was in a trance state, which is not unusual. A lot of us who do creative work go into a trance state, right? Arundhati Roy speaks about, she took 20 years to write a second article, book, because she was waiting for the characters to come and live with her, to move in, to introduce themselves, so that she could write the book. For her, it's real. You know, so I thought, okay, let me work with memories, because I was struggling to work, and I thought, okay, memories is one way, and my feeling to access these stories. Then I realized, okay, so what J.D. Lewis was doing, he was saying that the Khoisan is image making. They are making images of what they saw. But what he does in the image making is he represents the interiority of the Khoisan. And the image making is actually a settler colonial. He's following Bleek from the 1800s. And Wilhelm Bleek instructs him how to construct the art of the Khoisan. He says a collection of faithful copies of Bushman paintings. You can see they're still using that term. And even in 2011, when J.D. Lewis published, he still uses these terms. It's not in inverted commas. He just, like Stuart Hall speaks about under erasure. So he still talks about all that identity under erasure. And then he says, so a collection of faithful copies of Bushman paintings is therefore only second in importance to the collection of their folklore in their own languages. Both collections will serve to illustrate each other and contribute jointly towards showing us in true light the curious development of a most remarkable dress. You know, that's the voice that he writes in. And then you realize that actually the image making is J.D. Lewis. The first image is the myths. The second image is the drawing. The third image making is the interpretation of what he said. So when you look at the Rock Art Institute, it now becomes the Image Making Institute. And then you have the evidence of it in the coat of arms. You have the two Khoisan images. But those men have been emasculated. In the original artwork, Khoisan loved their penises. For I haven't worked that out. But the man was standing with an instrument and his penis. So, and he's a tall man. But in the coat of arms, they are shortened and he cut off the penis. And it's one image that is a mirror of the other image. So the image making is what they have created. It doesn't solve my problem, but that's what it is. So then I thought, okay, let me at least follow J.D. He's writing these myths, stories that go too far. So I thought, okay, let me trust him. You know, he's an academic, he's a scholar. Let me move through this process with him. So what he's saying is the only way to read the Khoisan art is through the cultural production, which is the myths, right? That's what he's saying. So once you got those myths, you can get an image of what they're writing. Once you look at that, you get an image of that. That's what he's saying. So I thought, okay, let me go. At the same time, I thought I need some help here. So Sylvia Vollenhoven, she wrote a book, Keep Overcome, and she speaks about how, she speaks about Abu coming to her and taking her through this process. So I went to a seer from our village, because there are lots of us who are now, you know, awakening. And I said to her, I can feel the images of my ancestors around me, but I cannot hear them. I can feel them. I can feel there's lots of people around me today, and they say, keep going there, keep going, but I cannot hear them. And so she took me through a process, and she told me, these are the rituals that you have to do. These are the things you have to stand, you have to feel the earth underneath you. And then what he said to me is that you've got to read this book. Remember, Kabu was imprisoned in the Breakwater Lodge. Bleek was a philologist, and so he took him out and he put him in the Mowbray thing, and then Kabu said, right, we're losing this battle, we've got to write our stories. Our people are going to understand it. So he said, you've got to read it, babe. So I went and I read it. I said, okay, let me go. So the first word he says, in June 1979, so this is now, he's now opening the book of myths. He's written it, he's now writing it. He says, in 1879, a man called Kabu was taken to the Grand Parade, Cape Town, to witness the arrival of Sir Bartle Frere, Governor of Cape of Good Hope, and Her Imperial Majesty Queen Victoria's personal representative. He's now talking like Kabu, So when you're looking at the image, remember you're representing the interiority of the person, your memories, your collections. So he's talking, he's telling us what Kabu would have experienced. So he says, soldiers marched, cannon fired, a salute, and excited citizens cheered. dressed in European clothing, and if you want to see Thabo, you can go to the origin, and you'll see the painting of him in his European clothing, yet detached from the proceedings. So Thabo is there, but he's detached, okay? Thabo watched all the pomp and ceremony accorded to the representative of world power that ironically was extending its control into the heart of his own distant land. No communication passed between Thabo and Sabato, Freer. The powerful and famous man continued on his way to his residence. Lost in the crowd, Thabo simply watched from afar. His own account of that poignant passing is given in this book, The Story 18. However, okay, now the other thing is, there's a lot of people who read this book now. A lot of people. The guy took 20 years to do it. The first line is wrong. Thabo died in 1876. So can you see? It's what this guy is talking about is his own image making. It's not Thabo's interiority. But I keep going. I say, okay. Now when I saw this, Thabo just chuckled. He was standing here and just chuckled. Then he said, but you haven't read the story. Okay, so if I go to the story, to see the story that Thabo had in 1879 when he was dead. So that can you see the other spiritual beings, the other spiritual beings that he spoke about there? Yeah. So Kum 18 is, it's beautiful because part of what was fascinating about Kum 18 is that it actually, I remember I'm trying to dig into my memories, and when I read it, I thought this is actually what we experienced when Nelson Mandela came out and we were on the Grand Parade. And it was the first time that we were experiencing this, right? Because the Grand Parade is actually a flame, which means that there's water underneath, right? So this is what he says. And I thought, wow, this is just like that time. And this is how now, so that, okay. He says, you have 5 minutes? Okay. I'm just going to do 2 lines and then I'll tell you. Then he says, the people were turning about. They were turning about. They stood still. They stood in rows. Other people stood together. They watched, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. And I looked, now I'm reading it, and then I looked to the top. Who wrote this story? Hanikaso. Hanikaso was Thabo's son. This is not Thabo. It is Hanikaso. There, Lynda, you can come here. Hanikaso. It's Hanikaso. That is not his name. His name is Thabo. His name is Yankee. Hanikaso is plain Yankee, son of Yankee. You see, so now I think to myself, okay, so that's it. So now one can start to look at the Khoisan art in a different way and start to see, so what did they think of it, right? Because one thing that J.D. Lewis says why it cannot be art is because one, it doesn't have the aesthesis, which means that they did not have the skill to practice their art. Because remember, they were doing it in, they were doing it in advance, right? That's what he said. The second thing he says why it cannot be art is because they did not regulate it, aesthetics. They did not appreciate it. Artistry, the appreciation and enjoyment of art. They did not. You see? How is that possible? I come from that, and I love art. The whole family, you know what I mean? So anyway, so this is kind of where I thought, oh, the last thing, I have one more. So what he does, the final thing is, what he does is, he says, the birth of art is rock art in Europe. And now the Khoisan art is no longer the birth of art. Because remember, we're the first humans. He says, no. The Khoisan art is now the earliest art, which did not use the imagination in the way that we think of it. They did not appreciate it, and they did not make it with skill. They were only making it in a trance. So that's my presentation.
Thank you so much, Bev. Next we have 2 presenters. It will be Boledi and Isaac.
I'll be presenting on a paper that is co-written with Ndlovu. It goes. The Crime Trilogy, Sibanda and the Rainbird, 2013, Sibanda and the Dead Sea, 2015, and Sibanda and the Black Sparrowhawk, by the female writer, C.M. Elliot, are set in the rural villages of Zimbabwe, which are at the edge of the Hangwe National Park, one of the country's prime tourist destinations. Although the hero of the three novels is Jabulani Sibanda, an indefatigable male detective inspector, it can be said that the actual drivers of the plot of the narrators are female characters. Starting with the author herself, as a female writer, this paper seeks to use Rosie Braidoti's notion of nomadism to examine the role and depiction of violent crimes by and against women that Elliot depicts. The paper also assesses the extent to which these novels can be said to participate in what Braidoti calls the biopolitically and technologically mediated contemporary debates in the depiction of female characters. Braidoti's theory of nomadic politics of life, which according to her, reflects the existential situation as a multicultural individual, a migrant who turned nomad, is used to think through the three axes of difference that structure female characters in Elliot's novels. That is sexualization, racialization, and naturalization. Quoting both, Braidoti observes a profound sense of non-belonging, of being outsiders within, infuses feminist literature. Elliot's three novels and the depiction of female characters does not only seem to support the above observation, but also proves Braidoti's further assertion that woman is the side of multiple, complex, and potentially contradictory sets of experiences defined by overlapping variables such as class, race, age, lifestyle, sexual preferences, and others. In examining Elliot's characters, one needs to take note of Braidoti's further observation. Not all nomads are world travelers. Some of the greatest trips can take place without physically moving from one's habitat. It is the subversion of said convention that defines the nomadic state, not the literal act of traveling. Indeed, although showing all the tendencies of nomadism, some of them have not traveled far from their local spaces. Braidoti indicates why nomadic subjects are important. She writes, nomadic subjects are capable of freeing the activity of thinking from the hold of phallocentric dogmatism, returning thought to its freedom, its liveliness, its beauty. So as one analyzes these characters, the extent of their nomadism allows us to examine the author's own nomadism, which gives us the opportunity to unhinge our thinking from phallocentrism. Most of Elliot's characters indeed allow the reader to think more freely. Braidoti argues that nomadism is a theoretical option and an existential condition that translates into a style of thinking. She further calls it a figurative style of thinking, occasionally autobiographical. As already alluded to above, the major nomad in Elliot's three novels is the author herself. She is a British who was raised in Australia and went on to live in Rhodesia and Zimbabwe for over 20 years. Elliot's acute awareness of different forms of human oppressions in her fictional rural space seems to be informed by the gradual loss of her European connectedness due to her long-term migrant status. Notably, her migrant status does not lead to her being politically anchorless. Elliot's female characters are firmly and carefully embedded in the post-2000 Zimbabwean tumultuous political and economic space. This allows the reader to interrogate the extent of Elliot's accountability and responsibility in the manner in which it manifests itself in the female characters she creates. She projects her feminist vision in the female characters she creates. The author's nomadism is evident from the way she combines her knowledge of fauna and flora into the depiction of the characters. Braidoti writes that the point of being an intellectual nomad is about crossing boundaries, about the act of going regardless of the destination. One can replace the intellectual nomad with an intellectual writer. For example, in describing Kanye's identity crisis as a result of not knowing her father and Mantini's trauma in dealing in the act of violence that led to Kanye's conception, the author is able to cross racial, cultural, and epistemological boundaries when she uses the metaphor of a cuckoo bird's cheek's ability to displace the cheeks of the mother bird, which actually build the nest of their home to describe Kanye's character. She writes, once the nestlings hatched, the baby cocoon would evict the chicks, nudges them over the edge. This description is provided from Mandini's perspective, which is a clear transposition of Elliot's knowledge of birds onto a black character who is unlikely to possess this kind of knowledge. However, the convincing nature of this description shows Elliot's ability to cross both racial and cultural boundaries in her creation of the characters. Kanye is a victim because she's a product of sexual violence, and she grows up with the identity crisis emanating from not knowing her father. This subsequently leads to a tragic situation where she unknowingly dates her half-brother and contributes to the death of her half-brothers Mtabisi and Chulani both. Kanye also appears as a victim of Sibanda's works, habits, but actually turns out to be playing Sibanda in a number of ways, entertaining Bongani and getting the best clothes as a result of her canon. As the vocalizer Sibanda thinks, Kanye was different, not needy and clingy or weepy when he didn't. She understood the nature of his job. She accepted it. It was part of his life, and he wasn't going to change it for anyone. The author clearly uses this to satirize Sibanda for his level of knowledge about Kanye. The irony is that she appears to be a model girlfriend for Sibanda, specifically because she's double-crossing him with another man. Ndlovu's wife also appear to be completely dependent on their husband, but it turns out that they form a sisterhood that isolates their husbands and gives them a measure of tool. Isaac will continue on the other part of the presentation.
So the presentation never really comes out the way you've prepared it. We were supposed to have shown you the trilogy that C.M. Elliot has written in order to inspire you to read. So there they are, 3 novels set in a rural Zimbabwe next to the National Park. And I invite all of you to go to Wande, just next to Victoria Falls. So despite the economic collapse, the Victoria Falls has not collapsed. And you'll enjoy the sights. So more examples of nomadism. Another indication of Elliot's nomadism is her extensive use of Ndebele words throughout all her 3 novels. In this regard, she becomes what Bradioti calls a polyglot. Bradioti writes, the polyglot is a linguistic nomad. The polyglot is a specialist of the treacherous nature of language, of any language. Words have a way of not standing still, of following their own paths. The use of Ndebele words is both a literary and a symbolic crossing of multiple boundaries. This raises questions about whether cultural identity comes from within or emanates from without, taking an oppositional stance. Over 20 years ago, Bradioti observed that the concept of mother tongue is stronger than ever. It feeds into the renewed and exacerbated sense of nationalism, regionalism, localism that marks this particular moment of our history. Today, these words are even much truer. In the context of Zimbabwean politics, Elliot's extensive use of Ndebele words in all her 3 novels that I've just shown you, and a general attitude towards the majority of Shona people suggests a deliberate regionalist and localist stance that aligns her with a linguistic group which sees itself as marginalized in Zimbabwe. Since she has lived in the Makholwa and North Province of Zimbabwe, which is culturally viewed as Ndebele, Elliot becomes a nomad who stands for movable diversity, whose identity is an inventory of traces. So she can be seen as writing the self-portrait of collectivity of the marginalized Ndebele people. Elliot's extensive use of Ndebele words also suggests that we are all stuttering for words, even when we speak fluently. Some of these words are Isilwane, Impenjo, and I indicate what they mean in English. Imbuzi, intombi enhle, ubulawa yini, hamba kahle usikhonzele, salibonani, isiphukuphuku, enganakile, etc. This extensive use of Ndebele words and phrases symbolizes Elliot's attempt to cross or transgress linguistic and cultural barriers, a predilection to normatism. Instances of wrong spellings or mistranslations suggest that acquisition of another culture and writing are impartial processes. Normatism is a metaphor for life's incompleteness. However, there are moments when slippages of Elliot's self-portrait of collectivity are noticeable. A case in point is Elliot's depiction of Sbanda's mother. I forgot to tell you that someone asked me whether I'm a feminist when she saw me here. I think it was Faith or someone. I said, no, I'm not a feminist. My PhD supervisor coerced me to attend feminism meetings. So, and my ancestor here can testify. So now I ended up, when people force you to attend something, you end up liking it. But today I was thinking about the fact that, in fact, maybe I am a feminist because there are three important women in my life: my grandmother, my wife, and my 13-year-old daughter. So for them, I'm a feminist today. The narrator exclaims about something that would be ordinary to a Ndebele villager. She writes, her, that is Sbanda's mother's ability to keep the bucket practically motionless as she walked with extraordinary grace over uneven ground back to the village was a skill honed since childhood. Another instance is when Sbanda is made to think about the treatment of homosexuals in Africa. He thinks homosexuality was completely taboo in Africa. It was seen as a sickness, or even worse, a lifestyle choice. Gays were reviled, hounded, labeled perverts, and imprisoned for their love. In both instances, it is obviously Elliot unwittingly portraying her outsider status regarding her adopted black Ndebele culture. Interestingly, Baijnath goes on to idealize being a polyglot. She argues that a person who is in transit between languages, neither here nor there, is capable of some healthy skepticism about state identities and mother tongues. This suggests that being multilingual allows one to achieve reflective, performative spaces. To a large extent, Elliot seems to attain this. It is when she seems to lose this reflective performativity in the creation of some of her characters, especially female ones, that she falls into stereotypical representations that her writing is a little bit worrisome. For example, the description of how the polygamous Ndlovu, a character in all the three novels, the way in which he paid the bride price for his wife, suggests that this is viewed through the eyes of an outsider. The narrator ascribes these words to Ndlovu. I bought Mama Zala, that is my mother-in-law, a new dress and a hat, and my father-in-law a new jacket and shoes, a few extra blankets, and some cooking pots, and blessing was mine. Blessing was supposed to be capitalized there. That's the name of his first wife. The irony, of course, is that it is one's removal from a monolingual environment that often triggers the emphasis on the sacredness of the mother tongue, a sort of nostalgia for the site of cultural origin. Elliot embeds an Englishness through such characters as Barry Burton and the protagonist Jabulani Sibanda. Although Zimbabwean, Barry is white and she seems to have a strong British ancestral heritage. This is further strengthened by the fact that she does her tertiary studies in England, where she meets Sibanda, who also does his policing studies at Nottingham Police College. But of course, in the case of Elliot, one needs to seriously consider the notion that writing itself, even as one is writing in her mother tongue, she is actually in a process of being a polyglot. Furthermore, Sbanda's notions of female beauty are decidedly Western or English. This is clearly a projection of the author's cultural preferences about Kani, Sibanda's first girlfriend, the narrator says, Kani was tall and slender, with an inbred grace that sets her above the rest of the local girls. Thank you. The focalizer here is Sibanda, who has apparently acquired Western tastes in his preferences for girlfriends. This idea is reinforced by the fact that in the last novel, Sibanda finally finds love in Berry, whose beauty is similarly described in televisionistic Western lenses. That's our invention. I don't think that word exists. Below is Sibanda's male gaze as Berry enters a room. A flurry burst in through the swing doors, soaked to the bones of her desirable body. Droplets fell from her wild blonde hair. They splashed across pale, flawless skin and streamed down her cheeks like tears, bleeding to be kissed dry. Notwithstanding the problematic gender politics raised by these words, Kani's black skin is clearly no match to Berry's pale, flawless skin. Baijnath also calls writing as successive adaptations to different cultural realities. The array of characters, especially the female characters that are in Elliot's novels, are sequential versions of various cultural certainties. The female characters include American tourists such as mother and daughter Pearl and Ruby, who are traumatized when they see a dead body during their early morning game drive. There is also Tiffany Price, the American you can see it on the who comes to the national park to do research and ends up being murdered when she stumbles on explosive information that could have taken out a lot of big people, including politicians. When we were fighting with Boledi to say, should we have slides or not? I said my accent is not the best. Some people will not understand me, so it's better if they fall. I'm now realizing that even my reading is not the best. For Baijnath, figuration refers to a style of thought that evokes or expresses ways of the phallocentric vision of the subject. Significantly, most of Elliot's female characters are portrayed in a paradoxical manner, as we have seen. Isabel McLean is violently abused, but she finds a cunning way of getting rid of her abusive husband. About her abuse at the hands of her husband, the narrator says, and I'll just project it, but I won't read it because I'm running out of time. And move on to the commentary. Although initially a victim, Mrs. McLean eventually rescues herself from her violently abusive situation. She starts with passive resistance. The narrator says, she had, months ago, sealed herself in a protective shell. He couldn't hurt her anymore emotionally. Brutality was his only weapon, referring to the abusive husband. From this point onwards, Mrs. McLean is no longer a victim anymore, although she is still physically abused. Once she has taken charge of her emotions, she is ready to move to the next stage of taking charge of the situation and stop the physical abuse once and for all. The narrator indicates that Mrs. McLean eventually finds a way of eliminating her husband. Earlier, Margaret, Isabella's domestic worker, goes along with Mr. McLean's story about a murder of Mutalis in order to keep her job. However, when McLean subsequently dies, Sibanda has a hunch that Margaret colluded with Mrs. McLean to poison the abusive man in a manner that leaves no concrete evidence pointing to them. I'll skip again, and you can see the quotation there. This cross-racial solidarity and sisterhood between the abused white woman and the exploited black female worker is indicative of some of the radical solutions that Elliot proposes for the brutalized and exploited females. Moreover, the fact that Sibanda knows that a crime has been committed. Remember, Sibanda is a police officer, a detective, but is not keen on pursuing the matter, suggests that dealing with female violence may require extrajudicial measures. The keynote speaker yesterday was saying, what should we do? Well, Elliot suggests that kill your abusive husband. Mantini is another, then I give another example of one who is abused through being raped during a war situation, and who also eventually takes charge of the situation. Conclusion. Our discussion of Elliot's representation of different female characters, and with the author herself being the protagonist in her own fiction, suggests that as an intellectual style, nomadism consists not so much in being homeless as in being capable of recreating one's home everywhere. Elliot herself has met Zimbabwe, rural Zimbabwe, and the Ndebele-speaking part of Zimbabwe, her home. She has met the gang park, violent crimes against women, and contemporary issues about ecology, her primary concerns. A part of a feminist vision lives in most of the female characters. On occasions where she has creative blind spots, one sympathizes with the author because one can still note Elliot's empathy and her striving for a vanishing point of a nomadic insider status. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Boledi and Isaac. And now we go on to the last speaker, Ditshego.
Good afternoon. It appears that Isaac and Boledi are my friends because we seem to be using crime fiction to grapple with larger discourses, such as feminism and other issues in our contemporary society. But then it seems Isaac actually touched on a very capital point in my presentation, and it says kill your abusive husbands. In my presentation, I examined two novels by a Black South African crime novelist, Makholwa, Beverley Society, which I will refer to as BWS throughout the presentation, and Red Ink, in which in BWS, Makholwa kind of suggested that if these men are really abusive, kill them. My presentation is titled Fold Lines in the Depiction of Gender Subversion in Makholwa's two novels. This paper examines Makholwa's two crime novels, Red Ink and Black Widow Society. Of course, I've told you that already. Let me rush to the other part. Makholwa takes advantage of the flexibility of crime novel and use it to create a fictional way of dealing with existing gender matters. Since crime fiction is traditionally known to be a masculine terrain, the placing of a female protagonist at the heart of this kind of narratives can be seen as a clear feminist act. In light of this opinion, Red Ink and BWS are clear feminist crime novels. Their plots are driven by female protagonists who are depicted as strong and independent characters in both novels, respectively. Although there are other writers such as Makholwa and Dimakatso who put female protagonists at the heart of their novels, Makholwa does much more than that. She actually places a black female character as a protagonist in a genre that is known to be white and masculine. These narratives seek to destabilize the inherent patriarchalism of crime fiction by creating strong and independent female characters, allowing them to go beyond the gendered assumption of what constitutes femininity and masculinity. Makholwa's novels validates Nameka's observation that most female literary works in post-colonial Africa strive to undermine gender space and differences created by dominant male discourses to sustain gender boundaries and stereotypes. Red Ink is Makholwa's debut novel and reveals an unclear and a bit problematic feministic agenda by the writer. For example, the protagonist, Lucy, is depicted as a naive character controlled largely and subconsciously by the subject of her autobiographical project, Napoleon Ndlovu, who is incarcerated for raping, maiming, and killing dozens of women. This problematic representation of power and gender is a result of the author's unclear position on issues of gender and feminism, since these novels marks the genesis of a feminist project. On the other hand, BWS represents development in her thinking and her position in feministic discourses and may be read as a sequel to the first novel. The novel depicts an intensified and clear feminist agenda. In this novel, Makholwa introduces the reader to a sorority of black women who go beyond their gendered expectation to foster a society which they call the Black Widow Society, whose objective is to free women from their abusive husbands by killing them. The BWS plot is driven by women who do not run away in cases of domestic violence and abuse as suggested by Bing, but rather stand their grounds and opt for an ultimate and permanent, even though immoral method of dealing with their domestic problems. They kill their abusive husbands through a third party, Mzwake Kuzwayo, a contract killer who, upon his release from prison, was confronted with unemployment and poverty and with a tantalizing business offer to kill for money by the matriarch of the society, Talula. Significantly, the courage of these women is similar to that of Lucy in Red Ink. Lucy is the protagonist in Red Ink, who achieves what other experienced male journalists and writers could not, securing a series of interviews with Napoleon, writing and eventually managing to publish his biography. Notably, the violent murders of husbands by wives in BWS reverses the structure and logic of Red Ink by depicting women who resort to the use of violence against men as a means of liberation from prevalent domestic violence in which women have traditionally been victims. Makholwa's depiction of female characters, Makholwa's depiction of female characters, which Binder refers to as transgressive female figures, because of their method of dealing with domestic violence, affords her an opportunity to critique larger discourses of prevalent domestic violence and abuse in contemporary South Africa, offering an imaginative world in which women could be the ones inflicting pain on men, therefore fictitiously putting them on an equal footing with their male counterparts. In Makholwa's novel, I see the evidence of what Naidu calls post-colonial genre bending, as she deviates from the well-rehearsed formulas of depicting female characters as weak and as bench warmers in crime fiction, and places them right at the center of her narratives. She undermines crime fiction tradition as noted by Mant, who argues that traditional crime fiction's plot is driven by a male detective protagonist who overshadows all his female counterparts. Makholwa uses her work to appropriate this masculine genre to offer a female perspective which intends not only to subvert, disrupt, but also to destabilize genre traditions that centers male figures at the heart of crime novels. In a way, Makholwa blurs the boundaries of popular crime fiction to create a new kind of crime genre that deals with feminism discourses. Her work could be classified as what Spencer refers to as hybrid crime fiction, because it foregrounds local female concerns in a genre that has traditionally always been masculine. She uses her main characters to participate in larger discourses of crime genre and feminism, focusing on the representation of female characters and their attributes in this predominantly male genre. These novels respond to the marginal and peripheral position occupied by modern black women in South Africa. The placing of a female character in a masculine position challenges the pervasive and unconscious cultural expectation for women, which shapes and naturalizes wider gender discourses. In this way, Makholwa's novels challenges the traditional representation of gender in crime fiction, wherein women characters serve to highlight the masculinity of the male protagonist, as argued by Martin. By creating powerful, fearless, and competent women who resort to representing violence and crime as a coping mechanism against gender-based violence, Makholwa's novels advances Knight's assertion that female crime writing opposes the chauvinistic literary representation. Offord's contents with this assertion, Offord concurs with this assertion by stating that modern South African crime fiction is preoccupied with the representation of gender and violence against women and the girl child. Spencer also argues that many crime narratives by female writers from South Africa and other parts of the continent are focused on feminist social agendas. These narratives' depiction of female characters undermines the tradition of this masculinist genre. For these writers, writing becomes a form of subversion and resistance to dominant masculine discourses and a form of agency, and Makholwa makes use of this platform and the ongoing discourses on gender equality to reject the representation of women who are depicted as passive and dependent, and depicts them as equal to men. Both Red Ink and BWS foreground a sense of sisterhood, a notion which is very central to contemporary feminist debates, which is defined as a unification of women into a group that is meant to provide support and engenders a sense of unique identity in each individual. For example, in Red Ink, the author brings together women under one roof through Lucy and Patricia's public relations firm, The Publicist. In this firm, these women decided to only hire women as a form of being feministic. The hiring of only women and the cheerful atmosphere that exists among them is a clear expression of a feminist agenda that seeks to empower women by showing that they can be economically independent without men. The independence of these female characters from men shows Makholwa's quest to write a kind of crime fiction driven by feministic agendas. Furthermore, the signal that Patricia and Lucy were as thick as thieves also indicates amity and solidarity that can exist between women who are united by a common economic cause, whose aim is not just to make money but to empower fellow women. To this, the narrator says, and I quote, "Theirs was a cheerful office of 6 female staff, and Patricia and Lucy were as thick as thieves." Close quote. This observation is aligned with Train's argument, which becomes very central to my argument as well, as he postulates that feminism values female bonding, awareness of women without continual reference to or affiliation with men, and the self-knowledge which prompts women to an independent judgment of both public and personal issues. On the other hand, in BWS, the Widow Society forges a sense of sisterhood as well, by bringing women together, women who have suffered violence in the hands of their husbands. The enormous organization, the Black Widow Society, headed by its matriarch Talula, becomes a justifiable organization for these women to cope with domestic violence and abuse. This society mirrors abusive husbands to liberate women from domestic violence. The society also seeks to help these women maintain their independence by establishing a female academy which aims at ensuring that the next generation of women does not suffer the same fate. This sisterhood is captured by Talula when she says, and I quote, "For many years, others like us endured pain, trauma, and torture at the hands of our unappreciative dogs who badgered and bludgeoned us, pelted us with vitriolic words and violent beatings, and one day we finally listened. We listened to what our souls told us. Yes, we listened to what our soul told us." These words captures the essence of why these women come together in a society that uses violence to counter violence. Interestingly, Namaika states that sisterhood is a form of power that symbolizes a collective bond of networking among people with a shared history of oppression. Therefore, the Black Widow Society's unity and sisterhood is reminiscent of the apartheid days in the townships where black women used to have what we call stockfiles. Although stockfiles were not entirely for a greater purpose of long-term economic and freedom attainment, they helped women to foster friendship and gave them an opportunity to deal with their problem as a collective. Although Makholwa tries to flip the coin on gender narratives, given the fact that crime fiction is a masculine genre, there seem to be several problems with their radical feminist agenda. These identified problems leads one to think that her feminism agenda is not radical enough. For example, in Red Ink, although Lucy manages to get Napoleon's story of rape and murder in many ways, Napoleon continues to exercise patriarchal power over her. Thinking that she is in control of their interaction, she's unaware that his romantic gestures of kissing, touching, and hugging her resembles his sexual fantasies about her, which makes her his object of interest and possibly a victim. Silently, he knew that he enjoyed the power he wielded over her as he gradually lured her into a web of deception. This indeed proves that Lucy was not in control. Napoleon was playing her as he did when he first wrote to her, inviting her to come to the prison so they can work on producing his biography. Napoleon is able to spread his tentacles to touch the outside from the inside, a phenomenon Ndlovu has termed the inside out in the discussion of prisoners' ability to stay connected to the world while inside. It was through this connection that he had Patricia Moabelo, who's Lucy's partner, and Tsepo, who's Lucy's boyfriend, brutally killed. Patricia was killed because initially when they went into business together, they had agreed on going 50-50, but when the business started making profits, Patricia kind of ripped her off, claiming 60% and giving her 40%. While for Tsepo, Napoleon having Tsepo killed through his brother's Fiso is a form of securing his spot, because the interaction between him and Lucy gave him the illusion that he was actually dating her. He had become his girlfriend. Now, he knew that she had a boyfriend outside, and then for him to be the only man in her life, he had to eliminate the other man. Similarly, although the widows seem to be in control of their organization in BWS, they still enlist the services of a male ex-convict to carry out their murders. Although Muzwaki occupies an inferior position in relation to the crime rate, by the virtue of his hold on the instrument of violence, which is the gun used to execute the murders, he still exercises considerable power over the widow society. As it turns out, this results into a bloody outcome and the destruction of the society when Muzwaki turns against these women. For example, during their last meeting, he decided to kill some women. The narrator tells us that he waved his gun around, uttering that, "I'm going to kill you." Throughout the narrative, the women determine the killing, commanding Muzwaki to go for it, but now he is the one deciding who should be killed and at what point must he pull the trigger. This punches holes into Makholwa's attempt to represent strong and independent female characters, as already stated above. Muzwaki's murderous power suggests that women may plan and plot violent crimes as a negotiating space for gender equity, but they still need a man to carry out the actual killing. To this, Prettiers and Bota concurs when they argue that rich and educated women tend to hire a third party in the case of murder of a husband. These women, the women who came together to form a society, were actually very much educated. Makholwa's attempt to use a narrative as a platform to negotiate gender equality and to subvert gender and genre tendencies which have accompanied crime fiction is also undermined by the fact that she cannot put female and male characters on an equal footing. For example, for men such as the Dindisoye brothers, murder is a crime, but for the women it is not. In this way, she justifies an immoral action of crimes committed by women while condemning the same crimes when committed by men. Her soft spot for her female characters is shown by the fact that her protagonist escapes the justice system. Furthermore, when one of the widow society members, Nobutula Bumere, is eliminated on the day her husband was expected to be eliminated by the society, the matriarch remarks, "Imagine a husband killing his own wife, the mother of his children. You really have to wonder what kind of society we live in." The narrator goes on further to inform the reader that Talula says all this without the slightest irony. But it is ironic, of course, because if she's contesting murder as a sorry, if she's refusing that this man matters, how do I put that? Sorry, if she's saying that men should not marry their own husbands, why is she leading a society that actually participates in killing errant husbands? Although PWS represent a more radical feminist version than Red Ink, in both novels, Makholwa ultimately failed. Sorry, I'm actually repeating it. Even though her stand in this regard could be a sign of power and independence as a woman who does not want to commit to a romantic relationship with a man, her decision becomes questionable and strips her of gender power and a quest for gender subversion when she starts reading literature on how to submit to a woman. It becomes somewhat ironic that after all the crimes committed in an attempt to free herself from the shackles of gender oppression, she yet again puts herself in a vulnerable position, giving men power over her body in a quest to find sexual fulfillment and pleasure. Through this, she opens up herself to sexual exploitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ditshego. Shalene is standing at the back there saying time up. So I have one round of questions. And please, can you make the questions time for one round while the other people are lining up, so we'll find the queue quite short. Please, can you make the questions short? Questions, comments, suggestions? Paul?
Yes, I'd like to address the last presentation because I'm quite interested in your reading of, I think I'll call it, so the playing with genre, and it probably speaks to a couple of the presentations, right? Whether it is a detective story, whether it is a crime. I wanted to ask you something about the reading. What is the tone? I mean, does Makholwa, for example, is it tongue-in-cheek? Are there levels in which there's irony or other sort of narrative devices that render our reading of it not transparent or realistic in a certain way? So what is the critique that could be made by thinking of maybe how she uses humor or stereotypes or plays with these genre conventions, right, to make a point? Because I was thinking that there's a way in which maybe because it's so genre specific, it might not be so much about social realism. You know what I mean? There's something else maybe that's at play.
Anyone else? Betsy?
Thank you to all the presenters. Really generate so much reflection. For Beverley, wanted to ask how we are influenced by Western ways of reception and reading and art, whereas art exists, art by definition is about the unspeakable and beyond rationalistic inquiry, and all the kinds of categories we bring and the abstractions we bring to art are questionable when art just wants to be. And you don't see this more than in this art. To just be, to exist.
Okay, thanks, Betty. Dina? Yes, please. Oh, sorry.
Thank you so much for all your presentations. They were all absolutely engaging. And I mean, the first presenter, wow, is all I can say. To Beverley, I wondered about your you know, it's obviously intentional, but the ways in which you speak about memory, but demand of us as listeners to work it out in terms of whether or not we want to choose which aspect of memory you're speaking about, whether it's imagination or spiritual. Like, you know, there's something you were demanding of us, and I wonder if your idea then of memory, you know, if you could just speak to what that is, and also quite fascinating in the way that you talk about, or in the way that you speak to alternative narratives, and therefore get us to think about this writer that you talk about as a permanent outsider, who almost, you know, because then this becomes a critique of the colonial gaze, but it's also a nuance, a suggestion for the inability for this person to never ever get something, you know, the narrative. And again, maybe it's something that you can just expound on in terms of what you were asking us to do, especially when you asked me to participate. And just very quickly, yes, on the crime, on the last presentation on Angela Makholwa as well, I did have a question on genre as well, and what is it about the genre itself, because you speak about the flexibility of the crime fiction, what is it about the genre itself that creates this flexibility for you? Is it perhaps not the fact that it is a popular culture genre? Is that a way in which then you could, in many ways, then speak to what Paulo is asking? I will ask other questions to the other speakers.
Thank you. All right. Beverley, do you want to start?
Yes, in terms of what you were saying, Dr. Betty, yes, it is about existing and healing, you know. So I think what I'm looking at is how it is perceived and trying to find other avenues of reading it here with beyond the cultural reading. Yeah, that's kind of, so I think yes. Yeah. So it's just a piece of it, you know? So I have to go through all those other sections that haven't been there, yes. Memory is a very important part of it, and thank you for that, because what you're saying is that I didn't speak about it in order to, you know, it was in my head. Yeah. When I prepared it, it was part of it. So I'm looking at how memory works in creativity. That was my thinking. How does memory work? And when I was thinking about that, what I realized is that a lot of the history that has been written in anthropology always reflects the memories of the settlers, you know. And so when I read it, I was like, so a lot of this is working with their memories of how they experienced the Khoisan and from their kind of thinking, you know. And that's how they came up with the image making, reading the art through the culture. And so I thought, well, are there other ways, black feminism thinking, decolonial, looking at the etymology? So I looked at I provided the Western kind of thinking on that, but there's also the other part which I follow in terms of other indigenous work about art. So for instance, and what I found is that a lot of these truths as a way of, not a fact as in it's evidential, but the truths in terms of how Toni Morrison thinks of it, oddity, strangeness, extreme. So when I'm feeling, this feels odd, so I use my own memory, because I was struggling to get through the writing of the history of the Khoisan. So I was using memory to say, if I was there, how would I feel? And then I'd say, but he's feeling like that. Now I'm feeling like this. Let me follow his path. And then find other ways of reading into that. Toni Morrison, for instance, she writes about her creativity, so I'm able to see how the creativity, imagination works, yeah. So for instance, memory is the whole thing of Khoisan art. What I found is that J.D. Lewis is using his own memories of what Willem Bleek's memories. So he's building on those memories, on, and that's how he gets to image making. So it's a beautiful, elegant, flawless work, you know, that he has done. And I think that it's evidential in terms of the settler colonial history. There's nothing that I can go against it, but what I want to do is say, okay, that is your history and that's how I follow it, but I want to offer an alternative, and starting from art as image making, art as just being. And Betty is right, because there was an element of just existing, because there's a story where they say, and the poem's also written, so if you touch the art, you can already know whether you're a good or an evil person, because the art will actually respond to you. It will disappear if you're evil, or it will stay if you're good. And that is fascinating. So for the Khoisan, you are meant to touch it, and it is meant to fade, so that another artist can tell a story. You see, so I want to look at, so I want to say, this is how we got to image making, and it makes absolute sense. I mean, it did take 20 years to do it. And so there is a beauty and elegance in that, but in secular colonialism. And now I'm looking at it from Khoisan, building on my memory. And then what I'm also finding is that the older women in our family who have not been westernized educated, but educated in a non-Western way, they also using memories in terms of telling stories about how they think what happened then and how that story is at. So I find that because we never ask, they don't tell us. But when you ask, they tell us in stories. But what they do is they don't tell you directly. They tell you a story, they look at you, they say, she don't get it. And they tell you another story. And they keep going until one day you get they say yes. So the process of learning is different with my mother, for instance. So when I read Cabo and I read the history, and he was supposed to be this informant, I can now see how he was trying to teach Wilhelm Bleer to write it. And I suspect that he looked at it and said, it doesn't matter how you write, but you interpret it. But if you write the story as it is, our people will see it. That's what I'm kind of seeing, that there's another part, another way of looking at it. But that thinking comes through the memories of feeling and knowing this. Yeah, does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I think I just missed that.
I hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Paulo, for that question. Yes, it is. The narrative itself, it's humorous. It's ironic in a way, because for the PWS, that's the novel you asked about. The narrative itself, these women who come together to form a sorority, a society that aims at liberating themselves from prevalent domestic violence, opt for the ultimate solution of murdering these husbands. But then, is this really the solution that we're looking for? But then, I want to actually highlight the fact that these are works of friction. And I'm trying to use this to grapple with large discourses in society. But that does not in any way mean that this is actually, it's real. But then, on the issue of tone, yes, I will actually note that, and pay more attention to the author's tone, because this it's just an extract from my larger ongoing project for my master's. So I'll definitely look at that.
Yeah, I just wanted to think about how humor can be used to critique as well. Irony, and so you're playing with genres and that tone. The humor can be quite important, can be quite a rich source.
I will note that. Thank you.
All right, guys, thank you so much. We can talk to them while they walk overnight. Please join us.